wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Hello. Welcome back to She Became Visible. I'm Renee Steelman, your host, and we have we're just going to have a chat today, you and I, and we're going to talk about some conflicting things. The message that I primarily promote on She Became Visible is trying to help women over the age of 60 gain their autonomy, gain back their independence, gain back their belief that they have individual worth and that it isn't tied in with a role that was given to them by an outside source. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I want to make this a very broad brush today because I want you to know that I understand where most of you who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or who are members of a very fundamental evangelical church, or who are members of a sect of Christianity that you have been a member of your entire life. Maybe it's a cradle to grave thing. You don't know anything other than how you're living and the doctrine that you've been fed. And the idea of walking away from that is frightening. And I want you to know that I understand that. And I want you to know that I also understand that I was in a place of privilege when I chose to leave my fundamental faith. I was in a place of privilege because I had a husband who has chosen not to leave the faith. He is still a true believing member, very active, and we have been able to work it out in our marriage. That's number one. Number two, our children were grown. And we have 6 children altogether. We have 4 boys and 2 girls. 3 of our boys are not active in the church. One of our daughters is not active in the church. And one is still active in the church. And this allowed me to make a break without too much judgment from my children or any kind of alienation from my grandchildren. And that's a privilege. I understand that. Number 3, we had recently moved out of state. And so we were no longer in the congregation that we had been in for 25 years. And so these were new people that we didn't really feel a strong connection to, plus COVID. COVID separated people. And this gave me an opportunity to do a lot of research, to make some fundamental decisions without any kind of community surrounding me or indoctrinating me. And also it gave me the opportunity to make a decision without having a lot of responsibility. Even though our children were grown and gone, we did have one. Our youngest son was severely disabled. He lived at home. I was his primary caregiver, and I would get him dressed and ready, and we would go to church every Sunday. I could not do that during COVID. And it was very much an awakening for me because there was Zoom church and I was able to watch it from home. And I was watching Zoom church at home, as well as doing a lot of research on historical information about the Mormon church. And so it really let me take a step back and do some reflection without a lot of outside noise. So that was another privilege that I had. A number 4, or whatever number we're on, I was able to connect with a lot of other people that have left the church because now in 2022, 23, 2024, there is a very large community of people that have left the Mormon church and they have found each other. Plus, there is a lot of things out on the internet. So I have so much admiration for people that left the church in 2006, 2007, 2005, when they were literally walking into a desert. So I completely understand that I walked away at a time of privilege. And so for me to just say, what's wrong with you? And, if you don't believe in this, just walk away. That's very, very privileged of me to say that. And I understand that. The other thing that I wanted to acknowledge today is there is a little bit of a phenomenon of depression in older people. And this is what some of the things that you can find on the internet. They say depression is a mental health condition that can affect people of any age, obviously. Depression in adults over 65 is sometimes difficult to recognize as symptoms can be similar to problems associated with aging. So you might have a relative, parents, or someone in your community that might be showing signs of depression, but you might chalk it off as just, well, they're getting old. And more than 1 in 10 older people experience depression. The three main causes of depression in older people are poor physical health, social isolation, and loss. Aging does not make treatments for depression less effective. With the right treatment, you can recover from depression, whatever your age. So I understand that. And I understand that, let's say you have two out of the three. You haven't suffered a loss. Perhaps your spouse is still alive. Your children are still in your community. You have relationships with grandchildren, but your physical health is really bad and it's really restricting you and it's causing isolation. So that might be a cause of depression. The idea of suffering from physical restrictions and then also losing your community is absolutely overwhelming. And I recognize that as well. Now, I have taken steps in my life to try and take care of my physical health because I have seen in my relatives and after doing my ancestry DNA, I know where my genetics fall. I know that I am genetically predisposed for arthritis. I am genetically predisposed for diabetes. I am genetically predisposed for macular degeneration. Those are three things that I see that in all of my relatives. I've seen my aunts lose their vision. I've seen my aunts lose their ability to be mobile because of arthritis. And I've seen my aunts slowly as they age be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So I am aware of those things and am taking as many steps as I can to try and alleviate those from my future. And so those are things that are very important to me. So again, I want you all to know that I recognize that we are all somewhere in a huge spectrum of aging. And so for me to present information to you as if I can do it, you can do it. That's very privileged of me to do that. And I want to acknowledge that today. But what I want to suggest is there a way for you to click back on your critical thinking skills, not leave your community, but learn how to take back your autonomy? Can you be two things at once? They say you can do two things. You can do hard things, and that there two things can be true at the same time. And so this is what this show today is specifically addressing. Now, first of all, I want to start out. I'm going to save you some time right now because I get this almost every time I do a podcast. Today, I am wearing Lip Sense. The color is Heartbreaker. All right. Over the top of this Lip Sense lip color, I have a clear gloss. I've chosen the clear gloss today. This is what the clear gloss looks like. Now, Lip Sense is a lip color that is long lasting, over 24 hours. And, but because of the formula, you must apply a gloss. It's very drying if you don't do that. So you can put this on, you can put your color on first thing in the morning, leave it at home, but you take your gloss with you, and this is what you reapply all day. So today I'm wearing the color Heartbreaker. I am also wearing the color tinted moisturizer, and I choose to wear a light medium or just a medium. I love their tinted moisturizer. It is not too shiny. It gives you a very light coverage, but just enough to even out your skin tone. I love this. I am also wearing a mini pearlizer. I use this as a blush, and this particular color is Firefly. So this is my blush that I use. And the concealer that I have on is what color is this one? I don't know what color this one is, but this is also the concealer that I have on. Eyeshadow, I use any brand of eyeshadow. Mascara, I use Ilia mascara right now. That's my favorite. Senegence does make a mascara. I haven't transitioned over to that yet, but I just want you to know, you don't have to email me or put it in the comments. I'm just letting you know right off. And just for your information, my distributor number is 825-706. So if you're interested, you can get online, Senegence, Senegence, and you can order it. Now, I've said this 50 million times, this is a multi-level marketing. I hate that. Absolutely hate it. I ordered this years ago. 15 years ago, I got into Lip Sense and Senegence products. And I quit. I quit because I hate multi-level marketing. But the problem is I love the product. I go back to it. I'll try other products. I'll go to Sephora and I'll try other products. And then I end up going back because I don't want to put my lipstick on all day. I've already eaten breakfast and I've eaten lunch and I have not had to reapply my color. It's a great product. I wish it wasn't multi-level marketing, but I'm not interested in the multi-level marketing process. That's why I just want you to go online, order it, have it sent to your house. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Valentine's Day. You don't even need to contact me. So there's my answer to the horrible, horrible business of multi-level marketing. So the other thing I wanted to remind all of you is my podcast and my YouTube is not financially driven. I am never going to ask you for a donation. I am never going to join Patreon. I am never going to turn this into a nonprofit because I am not doing this for financial gain. I am doing this for information. I also don't ever want to depend on my podcast for any kind of financial stability because I want the freedom to be able to change my mind. I want the freedom to research, do historical digging, fall into a huge rabbit hole, and change my mind. And so I don't want to have a lot of followers that are in one certain camp. And then one day I say, guess what? I've decided I don't believe that anymore. And all of a sudden, I've completely lost my source of income. I never want that to be this. But what I do want from you is a click to follow and subscribe. That's all I'm asking. Follow and subscribe. There is nothing financial that you have to do. One of the reasons why I left a certain group of people and went out on my own is because I didn't want to be tied to a specific subject or group of people. Now, having said that, you will find that almost all of my YouTubes and my podcasts are kind of ex-Mormon driven. Why is that? Because I joined the church when I was 12 years old. Of course, I was a child. My parents were baptized into the church. Missionaries knocked on the door. They joined the church, and I was a child, so I joined the church. And I had a great childhood. It was definitely a new learning curve. We had to learn new narratives, new verbiage. We had to join the bubble. We had to creep inside the bubble and learn how to belong there. But it was a great way to be a child and a young adult. And I also raised 6 children in this church. And a lot of it was because I did all of these things before the internet was invented, before historical truths could be validated. And since that time, since people can now go back, they can find diaries, they can find historical notes and things that were left, records. And a lot of the claims of the Mormon church can be debunked. And so, but when you have been in an organization from the time that you're 12, and I'm not going to get my calculator out, but I am currently 70 years old. So I resigned my membership from this church 4 years ago. So you do the math. But it was a and big part of my life. And so obviously walking away from that, you don't just walk away from a neural pathway that's been deeply dug into your brain. You don't just walk away from that. And it's a big part of everything, my marriage, the amount of children that I had, my weekly attendance, the social group that I hung out with, the clothing that I wore, the food that I ate. It was my life. And so I have walked away from it as a member, but I am still learning. I am still going down that pathway of finding out new information. And that's what I'm sharing with you. So I've had a lot of guests on my show, and they'll do a little bit of research before they come on. And they'll say, well, I watched some of your podcasts and I'm not a Mormon. So why do you want me to be on the show? And I'll say things, well, because you're a health expert, or because you are a Christian scholar and you know the New Testament better than anybody I've ever known. And of course, this is relative to what I'm talking about. I also, because I understand ageism and I understand the aging process, I want to have people on my show that are great examples of health. So I've had some fabulous women over the age of 60, over the age of 70, that are strength training, bodybuilding, really taking care of their bodies, and they're active, and they're going to dances and on cruises, and starting up their own podcast. It's absolutely amazing what they're doing with their lives. I had Julia on, and I'll see if I can reference that in the show notes. But she is a triple organ transplant. She was a diabetic. She has changed her life through her own choices as far as her health goes. It had nothing to do with religion. So this podcast is going to be very broad, but I really want to focus it on women and women's path into aging and autonomy, as I've said before. So that's my introduction. Subscribe, follow. That's all I'm asking of you. All right. All right. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So the word cult is very triggering because it's been associated with a lot of horrendous activity, murder, suicide, kidnapping, child abuse. When you hear the word cult, that's what you associate it with. But we're going to talk a little bit. Cult is a short version of culture. And we all fall into culture. I was just talking with my brother yesterday, and his son is getting ready to go on a mission, and he hasn't received his mission call yet. And I said, what people don't understand is there are many cultures in the United States of America. Even though we are one country, there are different cultures. And so even if you live in Utah, but you get called on a mission to South Carolina, that's a completely different culture. It might even be a different language, if you can't understand a certain accent for you. So I think it's important that we remember that cult is short for culture. And we all have probably fallen into some kind of culture trap. And that's what we're going to talk about. So let's start out. I want to show you this first video, and I'm going to be adding and subtracting videos as we go along here. So let me bring on this short video.
Signs that you are in a cult. Acts chapter 20, verses 29 and 30, it says, "For I know this, that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. Also from among yourselves, men will rise up, speaking perverse things, to draw away the disciples after themselves." A cult is a social group that is defined by its unusual and non-traditional religious, spiritual, philosophical beliefs. A cult usually has a charismatic leader who thinks that the whole world revolves around him and his theories and his line of thinking. He usually requires exclusive devotion to himself and to his unorthodox beliefs or goals.
Okay, let's stop right there and talk about this, because if the number one definition of cult is a charismatic leader who has a little bit quirky ideas, and they kind of demand a complete devotion to them and their beliefs, then obviously the Mormon church falls very easily into that category. Joseph Smith followed a lot of Methodist thinking, Calvinist thinking, Protestant thinking, but he also tweaked things to where they became very unique. And this is what kind of made a lot of people drawn to him. So, number one, if that's one of the first signs of a cult, perfect. Let's go on.
and requires absolute obedience from his followers. Cults can range from small local groups to international organizations with millions of followers. Christian cults are groups that have a Christian background but are considered to be theologically weird or different, such as the Mormons or Christian Science or Jehovah's Witnesses or the Unity Church.
I thought this was interesting because it is something where I think people, when they think about the idea of cults, they think of small groups. There was a movie that came out last year, The Jesus Revolution, I believe it was called, and you could call that a cult. What this well, it was kind of all about that. The cult aspect of it was a small group. I had never heard of it. It obviously didn't have 17 million people like the LDS Church has, but it still had all of the categories that you need to check to be considered a cult. And so there again, check, check. Here we go.
Their beliefs deny some of the most fundamental Christian teachings. Currently, there's about 2,500 to 3,000 active cults in the USA today, and 1,000 more around the world. There's more women in the cults than men, and they're being recruited because honestly, they're most vulnerable, sometimes especially when they're passing through distressing emotional conflicts.
Okay, once again, let's talk about that. Statistically, there are more women in the Mormon Church than there are men. So this again falls very easily into this other category. And why is that? Well, I'm sure there is a lot of science behind this, a lot of empirical data that would talk about women and their hormones, the way their brains work, their relationships with their children and their families. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that. But why do women fall more broadly into cults than men? And I thought that was very interesting because it's true. There are a lot of single women in the church. They're looking for community, they're looking for a sisterhood, they're looking for a tribe that they can feel safe in. I mean, we're not even going to talk about the bear or the man in the woods, right? But they can feel safe in the Mormon church. They can go to church easily. They can go to the activities that the church puts on, and they feel safe because they know that or they believe, I believe they think they know that they're safe. And obviously, there's a lot of, if you just go to floodlit, FLOODLIT.org, you can see all of the cases of Mormon men who have been charged with some kind of abuse. And so obviously, again, you have to have your own critical thinking skills turned on, which is what I'm advocating for today. But it is relatively a safe environment for single women. Hence, we have a lot of single women in the Mormon church. And I love how I continue to say we, even though I am no longer a member. It's just a habit, like I said, for all those years. Let's go on.
And they are promised companionship, peace of mind, and security. Every cult usually has four main descriptions. One is they reject orthodox biblical teaching. They, believe that salvation is not by grace, or the cross of Jesus Christ is sufficient for the salvation of our sins. It's good works. Usually it's based on good works. Something along the line that it rejects Jesus's atoning work on the cross.
Ta-da! That is one of the main doctrines and policies of the Mormon church, is that you do not go to the highest kingdom through grace or strictly through the atonement. That we believe in those things, or the church members believe in those things, but you also have to have good works. That is why the church is kept so busy with activities, because through your good works, you will show your obedience. And so again, they also have doctrine that a lot of people don't consider Mormons Christian because our belief in Jesus is different than most Christian churches' beliefs. And so there again, they fall outside of the norm, and which qualifies them once again.
The second category is that leaders are usually lords. They isolate their followers and they penalize them for wanting to leave the group. And pretty much leaders act like lords instead of servants. The third category is that the cult usually is ran like a cartel, meaning it requires absolute loyalty to its leaders and punishing those who decide to leave.
Okay. Do I need to say more? Punishing those who do not follow. I mean, I think the church is becoming a little aware that the things that they used to do are no longer acceptable by the world, because there is this little thing called the internet. And so now there are cameras, there are cell phones, there is recorded proof of excommunications, and the people are very free and open with why they're being excommunicated. Why are you being kicked out of this community that you've been a member of your entire life? Well, it's because you don't agree with some of the doctrine. You disagree with some of the cartel leaders, as he mentioned, who are in charge. And what's ironic is that years ago, people were excommunicated for things that are now being celebrated in the church. It's very unfair. And I know the world isn't fair totally, but when you have a doctrine that supposedly comes from God, that is now that people were excommunicated for, but now people are being celebrated for having those ideas, that is very confusing. And we won't even, I don't think we'll be talking too much about gaslighting, but that's one of the examples of gaslighting.
And the fourth category is that the moral and legal issues are usually crossed. They consider themselves above the law. There's no financial transparency, nor oversight or accountability to anyone. So you may listen to that and look, man, when I go to a Christian.
Okay. Again, check. The church was just recently found by the SEC for not filing the necessary paperwork on the corporations that they had formed. And it was illegal. They paid $1 million. The Ensign Peak, which is the legal corporation that the church owns, they were charged $4 million. So $5 million, which people will say, well, that's really nothing, but it is really something, because those are very high figures for what the SEC normally charges people. They were found because they aren't transparent with their financials. They're not transparent with what they do with your tithing dollars. And they are still under investigation for not being financially transparent. The other thing that's very ironic is that they will make a small humanitarian donation to something that's going on in the world, and people just fall out of their chairs. They're just like, look, see, we are a charitable organization. We are concerned with the poor and the needy and the widows. No, because in comparison to the amount of money that the church is spending on real estate right now, it's nothing. It is absolutely nothing. So this is the perfect, another check. The other thing that's going on, and I will just briefly see if I can do this. Let me see if I can do this, and forgive me if I can't. Okay, let me see if I can share this with you. Okay, I don't know if the sound is going to be there. I apologize if it's not. There will be a silent thing going on, but let's see if we can get this to play.
It's the small town feel with big house lots.
A stone throw to all the conveniences of the big cities.
That's why they chose Fairview. In March, Joel Shue got a letter about a new incoming neighbor.
8.6 acres.
Plans for a nearby temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. All was fine.
We knew it was going to be a church, but had no idea to what extent.
Until they say they heard how big it was going to be.
And I'm having a hard time believing what was presented in the letter is actually going to occur.
It's been dubbed the McKinney, Texas Temple, a 44,000 square foot multi-story building on the 8-acre site along Stacy Road near the current church. The church's press release makes no mention, and what residents have come to find is how tall its spire will be, 173 feet, which is 16 stories high.
173 feet, which would be the tallest structure in Fairview, is not reasonable and prudent.
It's as tall as one of our water towers.
Henry Lessner is the mayor of Fairview, and he's talking about this water tower. The mayor confirms the roof line is expected to be about 65 feet high. These neighbors say both measurements far exceed town standards. The church has applied for a conditional use permit. The property is zoned residential, which will have to change. Natalie Meehan says a petition has gone around the Fairview neighborhoods. She says this has nothing to do with religion. Her family are members of the Church of Jesus Christ.
So we're just asking that they scale back.
The mayor says they've received over 1,100 emails on the topic, for and against. He says the town's only job is to be fair.
Let's see what our planning and zoning group does. Let's see what the LDS folks do. How does that all work together?
The church has invited us to its next informational meeting on May 2nd. They cannot confirm any measurements at this time. Planning and zoning will first hear the church's proposal in early May. City Council by June.
Fighting for Fairview. That's all we got.
In Fairview, I'm Joe Piper.
Okay, hopefully that went through. So this is a perfect example, and I could go back historically. The entire polygamy idea was against the law, and even though when Utah was trying to get statehood, they finally had to say, "Fine, okay, you twisted my arm. We'll stop living the law of polygamy or celestial marriage. Will no longer live that law." So they sent out a memorandum, but secretly they continued to practice polygamy. And so they were lying. They were dishonest. They were going against the law. And so this is another perfect example. Now, what they're doing in Fairview, Texas, Fairfield, is they are going against city ordinances. And they are claiming persecution, which is something that the church also does. And because, they're saying, "Oh, you just don't want the Mormons here." And as you could see from that article, the people were like, "We don't care if you build a church. You just can't have a steeple 16 stories high. You can't be the largest building in Fairview, Texas." And so they have legitimate arguments. Here's the culty part. And I want you to do some rabbit hole digging yourself, all right? A letter came down from the top. It was sent out to the stake presidents. There are 3 stakes that take in that temple district, and they received a letter which then was forwarded to the different congregations, where the members of the church were told to show up for this city council meeting, to wear white shirts, that's not culty, and to tell the city council that the height of the steeple is part of their temple worship. Now, that's a lie. It's never been part of the temple worship. So that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about cultish behavior. And I thought that was a perfect example. So I'm going to get rid of this one so that I can add another one. Go away. Wait, how? Go back. And okay. All right. So let me share this with you now.
I have always been drawn to community. Being in community, building communities that I believe in. I've been a lifelong learner, seeker, total joiner. Brownies, drama club, summer camp. I was raised by fantastic hippie parents who taught me the importance of making the world better. Also bring snacks, be ready for sing-alongs. I'm incredibly organized, I'm a big connector. I've been told I have big cruise director energy. No clipboard today. I was also in a cult for 12 years. And I'm here today to protect you all from the same shit show that I went through. Yeah, you want this. My talk is rooted in awareness. I want to help you to navigate all the culty groups out there so that you can seek safely. So, in 2005, I was an aspiring actress / waitress when I was invited to NXIVM, a personal and professional development program with a seemingly altruistic mission to change the world one person at a time. Big red flag. And I truly found an incredible community of like-minded humanitarians and a place where I could help people set and achieve goals and bust through their limiting beliefs.
One of the things that Sarah is telling her audience there in her TED Talk, and if any of you have not had an opportunity to watch The Vow, I believe it's on Netflix, you need to go and watch that. And I'm going to be showing you a little part of that next. But I think what Sarah really highlights is that she was smart. She was not suffering from addiction. She came from a good, loving family, and she was just a joiner. She was someone who loved community, and she was really attracted to what the NXIVM was teaching as far as being an extraordinary leader and the leadership skills that they were teaching. And so the sad thing about the Mormon Church is they do the same thing. These young missionaries will go out and they will talk to people about the plan of salvation. They will talk to people about having a prophet on the earth. And these are all things that they may have read in the Bible, but they did not think or believe that this was existing or going on right now. A lot of people will say, why am I here? Where am I going? What is my purpose? I remember hearing Shirley MacLaine talk about that. I've heard people like Kathy Griffin talk about that. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Almost all of us have those thoughts. And when you have someone or an organization that can answer those things for you, it's very exciting. So let's go on.
It's wonderful. But it was also a facade for something sinister, something that would take over my life slowly over a decade with a slow build of coercion, obligation, gaslighting, and control. It wasn't just a highly toxic workplace. This was a high control group, AKA a cult. But I couldn't see it. There were so many great things about the community clouding my judgment. I rose up the ranks, became one of the company's star recruiters. It was incredible. I thought that I'd found the best club ever. My people, the chosen family, but more importantly, a place where I had community and belonging. Those were things I was looking for ever since I was a little girl. I had actually wandered onto the path of self-reflection and transformation without any tools for navigating or protecting myself. But I was in deep. My actual friends and family saw less and less of me. As I'd spent more money on time and trainings, and my worldview got more narrow. My language became coded. I sounded like a NXIVM robot.
Okay, let's talk about that. So what Sarah is talking about is even her language was different. And I want to give you another example. And here she talks about leaving her friends and family. Now, let me share an experience with you. I have a friend, and I don't have permission to tell her story. So I'm just going to roughly give you, because it's not a singular event. It's very universal. But this friend has not resigned at her membership, which I'll explain that in a little bit. But she no longer is active in the Mormon Church, but a couple of her children still are. And one of the beliefs of the Mormon Church is that if you are not married or sealed together as a couple through a ritual that is done only in a temple, then you are not sealed for time or for eternity. You might be married for this time on earth, but you will not be an eternal couple unless you go through the ritual and take covenants that can only be done inside a temple. So this believing child got married over the weekend. And because this friend of mine is no longer an active member, she could not go inside the temple to witness her child's wedding. And that is a punishment. That is a motivating tool that the Mormon Church uses to get you to be obedient to the rules, to pay 10% of your income, and to follow the leaders of the church. If you have to do all of these things to get what they call a temple recommend, then you can attend the temple and take part in these covenants that you will make and the rituals that are done in the temple. And so this is a tool that's used. It's an exclusatory tool. It is an elitism. Oh, you don't have a temple recommend? Oh, you can't go inside the temple? Well, you're not quite as good as we are. You should strive harder to reach that level of obedience so that you could receive all the blessings that we are receiving because of our devout obedience. So that's exactly what Sarah is talking about here. Isn't she amazing? She's so great.
Was on the top of this grifty iceberg, a Nexium pyramid, and it truly haunts me to this day. How many people I brought in, my friends and family, who in turn brought in their friends and family through leveraged trust, till I had grown an organization so big, I could open the first center in Canada.
Okay, what Sarah is talking about here is basically missionary work. When my mother joined the church in 1962, I believe it was, she came from a family of 7 siblings. There were 8 children in her family. As it turned out, her oldest sibling, the oldest child in her family, was a Mormon. She had joined the church years ago. I don't even remember it. I don't think I even know what her conversion story was. But because she was not missionary minded, she didn't talk about the church when we got together for family gatherings. So when the missionaries came knocking on my mother's door, it wasn't because of anything that Aunt Marilyn had done, but there was a familiarity. And then once my mother joined the church, my mother is more militantly minded. And so she became a militant missionary, and she went about converting a sister, a brother, and her mother. She also alienated all of her other siblings because she wouldn't stop being a missionary. And they got tired of it. All of a sudden, our family gatherings stopped. We no longer held our annual Father's Day picnic that we had done that celebrated all the graduates, all of my cousins. That all ended. And we no longer got together as a family because this church-minded woman would not stop proselyting. And so that's what Sarah's talking about, that she brought family and friends into the organization, such so that she could actually open up another Nexium in Canada because she was so good at what she was doing. And that's exactly what any kind of evangelical religion teaches their people to do. Spread the word. Why are you ashamed of your church? Tell everybody about it. That's one of the tools that they use.
Which was something I used to be incredibly proud of. Some of those people are still loyal to the cult to this day. It all came to a head when I was invited to a secret Nexium offshoot, a badass boot camp for women only, sold to me as empowerment when it was actually enslavement. Just a way for Keith Raniere, the company's founder, to brand women as if he owned them. Yeah. He also blackmailed many of them into sex. I managed to dodge that bullet. Thankfully, it was the branding that woke me up. I mean, one minute you're selling a goals program, and the next minute you're sweaty and naked on a table being branded in a secret sorority. And it wasn't the moment of the branding itself. Nope, not when I was sliced open without anesthetic. But later, when I found out that the symbol on my body was not that of the 4 elements, as I'd been told, but actually Keith Raniere's initials in a cryptic monogram. Yeah, I had his initials.
Okay. So I'm going to take this out and I'm going to take this one out so I can add another one. So basically what Sarah is saying was, even when she was physically branded, it wasn't until she saw the real meaning of the branding before she was awakened. And I like to use the word awakened rather than deconstructing, because it wasn't that I was taking down something. It was that I was being enlightened. I was learning things. I wasn't taking anything down. I haven't taken anything down. The Mormon Church is not any worse or any less huge. The numbers are not any less because I left the church. But I myself have been enlightened, and I have been lifted because of the knowledge that I discovered. And that's what Sarah talks about. So I'm not going to show anymore because I really want you to go and watch the vow on the whole Netflix documentary that was done on this. But the other thing that she mentioned, I hope that you heard it, was that he went from starting this organization to soon he was using sex as a power tool, and he was gathering women. And that is exactly what the Mormon Church did. If Joseph Smith was alive today and he was trying to start a new religion, as he did in 1830, he would be arrested, like many of these other cult leaders have been. So let me show you a little bit with this.
The FBI, Homeland Security, and the Justice Department because of threats on my life. So I really don't want to say where I'm at, but hello. I'm Rick Allen Ross. I'm a cult deprogrammer, and I've been helping people escape cults since 1982. Today, I'll be breaking down clips from TV and film about cults. This clip is from the vow.
Our main emphasis, our main belief is to have people experience more joy in their lives.
What does it mean if you're integrated? You're joyful. And part of it was like, this is cool. This is a code to understand myself.
Anyone can be captured by a cult. I've deprogrammed 5 medical doctors. How does that happen? If you're in a position where you're isolated, you're alone, you're hurting, you're worried, and a group comes along and says, look, we've got the answers. We can help you. They've got to have something good. Otherwise, no one would be taken in by them.
Keith developed a model called rational inquiry. We refer to rational inquiry as a technology.
It was a process designed to produce quantifiable results.
The premise of rational inquiry, as presented by NXIVM, was that this is a panacea. This is a cure-all. You can make more money, be higher functioning. The problem with NXIVM is that wasn't all they were up to. They were breaking people down in order to change them. This is typical of what's called large group awareness training organizations, where they bring people together in a kind of seminar setting. And what we're talking about is a kind of process that goes on day after day after day. During this time, you are constantly with other NXIVM devotees. You're constantly hearing their jargon. You may not be getting enough sleep. You may not be eating right. You're kind of getting worn out. You're being...
Okay. So one of the things that this gentleman is talking about here is the group mentality. And in the Mormon Church, a lot of times the temple is, we are encouraged to attend the temple regularly, at least once a week. And a lot of times they will organize an entire congregation so that they can all go to the temple together. And let me show you a clip of a little bit of what goes on in an LDS temple. Let's make sure I have the right one here.
Use maybe brother. Take it out.
The person for whom you are officiating. We will now make the sign of the first token of the Melchizedek priesthood, or sign of the name. This is done by bringing the left hand in front of you, with the hand in cupping shape. the left arm forming a square. The right hand is also brought forward, the palm down, the fingers close together, with the thumb extended. This is the sign.
Okay, so what I've shown you is a secret hidden camera that someone snuck into the temple and recorded the temple ceremony. But didn't that look exactly like what was going on with Keith Raniere in the vow, where they've brought people together? They in the Nexium, they had sashes that the people would wear, and it showed what level of authority they had. And in the Mormon temple, they have temple clothing, which is not to be discussed, not to be shown. It's supposed to be very, very secret. And you only find out about it when you are an elite member and are allowed into the temple for the sacred rituals that you must partake in to receive the highest level of the highest kingdom where you will live with Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father. So they're very much similar. Let me get rid of this one so that I can bring in another one. So this is a perfect example of what the first gentleman was talking about. Now let's talk about something else. He talked about the signs of a cult being strict obedience. So let's listen to a female leader in the Mormon church. She is a never been married. She is a single sister, and but she has served in many areas. She was president of Deseret Book, which is a profit corporation that the church owns that sells all of their written materials and little games. And you can get your church temple clothing like you saw in that video. You can get that at Deseret Book. And she was the head of that. She's written a lot of biographies of some of the leaders of the church. So she's very predominant in leadership. However, she does not hold any kind of authority. She holds positions of authority, but all of everything that she has done is under the power and authority of men. But let me share with you how she is propagating the teachings of the Mormon church.
Third, the gift of prophets. The Lord both makes and fulfills promises through his prophets. For whether by the Lord's own voice or by the voice of his servants, it is the same. The sobering truth, however, is that throughout history, most of the people, most of the time, have not believed in prophets. The Jaredites illustrate this perfectly. Consider just 2 verses indicative of many, many more. From Ether chapter 9, and there came prophets in the land again, crying repentance, but the people believed not the words of the prophets, but they cast them out. From Ether chapter 11, and there came many prophets and prophesied again unto the people. And it came to pass that the people hardened their hearts. And
okay, this is one of my favorite things I've talked about in some of my other podcasts. I love it when Mormons get up and address the congregation, talk about preaching to the choir. They're talking to large groups of people, probably who are all members of the church. And they use scripture that is exclusively Mormon scripture. So anybody that is not a Mormon would be saying, what's Ether chapter 11? Where do you find the book of Ether? I've never heard of the book of Ether. Well, that's because it's in the Book of Mormon. So they'll use Mormon scriptures to validate Mormon rules, policies, and doctrine. I mean, that's like, using a communist to explain why communism is so great. And then everyone going, oh, well, he said, Putin said it was great. So it must be great because Putin said it was great. I mean, it's so biased. It's not even, it's hilarious, but I love it because they'll do that. They'll say revealed words from God that you can find in Mosiah chapter 5 or, Nephi chapter 3. And anybody that's not a member of the church is going, what are you talking about? It's like, well, that's Mormon doctrine. And claiming that this is a revelation from God, obviously only given to Mormons.
Would not hearken. What happened to the Jaredites? Just as the Nephites and Lamanites would do later, they destroyed themselves through their own wickedness. Today, a relative few believe that the Lord has again sent many prophets to the earth. Many find the words of our 15 prophets, seers, and revelators inconvenient.
Okay. Do you notice anything about this group of guys here? These group of guys all dressed in white, these 15 prophets and revelators that she's talking about. Do you notice anything about them besides the white marble Jesus behind them? They're all white. They're all elderly. The man in the center, who is the prophet, is almost 100 years old. These are the men who supposedly speak for God. When a prophet on the earth speaks, he is speaking for God. That is a Mormon belief.
And even politically incorrect. But prophets are under covenant to teach truth. They do not stoop to flattery, which is why they may seem unbending at times, especially with moral relativists who play to the crowd and deny the existence of absolute truth. Those who choose pundits over prophets make the tragic choice of choosing foolish and blind guides rather than seers, whose ordination allows them to see things we don't yet see and to detect spiritual subterfuge before the rest of us can.
Okay. I can only watch so much of this, so I'm going to take Sherry off the screen here. So she is prophesying, or she's not prophesying. She is proselyting and saying that those who choose to not follow the words of the prophet have chosen wickedness and abomination and destruction. And so, but when you historically go back through the church history and you find some of the things that some of these prophets have said that are absolutely deplorable, they don't address those things. And I've talked about that. Go back to my last podcast and listen to it, where they will literally talk about racist, misogynistic, homophobic, all kinds of supposed doctrine that has come directly from heaven. And so I guess God is just a homophobic, misogynist, racist. I don't know what to tell you. So let me give you another example.
About prophets, if you don't mind. Anytime the true church of Jesus Christ, the gospel of Jesus Christ has been on the earth, there has been a prophet. The Old Testament teaches us that God doesn't do anything unless he reveals his will through his servants, the prophets. It is one of the signs of the true church of God. The scriptures tell us so. God puts a prophet on the earth to serve as sort of a go-between between him and us, his children, because he recognizes that in this telestial temporal life, we will be surrounded by all kinds of opinions and ideas. People have no problem expressing what they feel is right or what they feel is true. And so how do you cut through all that information, that data overload? How do you find your way through all the noise and confusion out there? Heavenly Father has not left us alone on this trip, but has supplied us with a voice, with a beacon, with somebody who can help us recognize what is right and what is wrong.
Now, who decides that? What he is saying is that God has put a person on the earth to help us know what is right and what is wrong. Now, let me give you just a little example. And this is just a silly little example, but let me just show you a little clip. This is a few years ago. I think it was in 2018, this little clip.
So what did this dear boy do? He came to me.
Let me go back.
A 6-year-old grandson became very upset when his father said it was time to go home. So what did this dear boy do? He came to me and said, "Grandfather, may I have your permission to disobey my father?" I said, "No, sweetheart. One of life's great lessons is to learn that happiness comes through obedience. Go home with your family and you will be happy." Though disappointed, he dutifully obeyed. We should pray in accord with the will of our Heavenly Father. He wants to test us, to strengthen us, and to help us achieve our full potential.
Okay. So, first of all, let's address the language here. None of my grandchildren talk to me like that. Grandmother, may I have your permission to disobey my father? Okay, my grandchildren don't talk to me like that, okay? So this is so staged. It's pathetic. But let you look at a comparison, if you will.
Rachel Jeffs, the daughter of the most infamous polygamous sect leader in the United States, speaking out for the first time live right here in Moments. Rachel is the child of a man who had nearly 80 wives, a man who married her off to become a sister wife herself at just 18, a man whose emotional and other abuse made the odds of Rachel escaping to freedom next to impossible. In a way, her story is almost familiar right now. Women everywhere these days are finding the courage to speak up about abuse by powerful men, but Rachel's life story is anything but common. Born into the Fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints, or FLDS, she was taught from infancy that she must obey. Obedience was everything, which makes her decision to be here today even more extraordinary. Many of us, including me, knew very little of the FLDS until a raid at their Texas compound back in 2008. Do you remember this? Look at these pictures. Remember this? We saw the images of the women in the pastel dresses with their hair swept up high, who looked like they were from some bygone era. The mothers cried as state officials removed their children from them. They were later returned. And the world wondered, why? Who are these people? The answer is complicated, and the relationships are complex. But at the heart of this mysterious group is the Jeffs family, including Father Warren and his favorite daughter, Rachel. The images look like something from a Hollywood film. Women in prairie dresses, homes that shun contemporary life, including television, popular music, the internet. No public schooling, no mingling with the outside world. For Rachel Jeffs, this was no movie. This was her life.
We were taught that the
Okay. So oftentimes, the Jeffs family and the polygamists that live in southern Utah, northern Arizona, are classified as a break-off group. We don't practice that, the leaders of the Mormon Church say. We don't believe that. We excommunicate anyone that has any kind of association with the FLDS. But the reality is, these people took Joseph Smith's teachings, and when the church was trying to get statehood, so they disavowed polygamy, they said, no, you cannot disavow a doctrine that came from God. We will continue to live this law. And so they have done that. So let me show you this.
Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, and his wife Emma, employed housemaid Fanny Alger, a teenage girl who lived in their home and helped with household duties. The Mormon prophet and the teenage girl had an affair and married in secret. After learning about Joseph's tryst, his wife Emma confronted him. Emma has the girl evicted from her home. By August 1835, word of Joseph Smith's secret polygamous marriage spreads. His church fires back to quell the unrest. It publishes a blanket denial in the church newspaper. Inasmuch as this church has been reproached with the crime of fornication and polygamy, we declare that we believe that one man should have one wife. This statement that prohibits polygamy was then canonized in the Doctrine and Covenants as Section 101. Church general authorities also threatened to disfellowship any elder caught in polygamy. The Mormon prophet himself also gave a denial during a Q&A published by the church. To the question of, do Mormons believe in having more wives than one? Joseph Smith answered, "No, not at the same time." Yet, soon after, and for the remainder of his life, Joseph would take several dozen as wives. Historians conclude that he had anywhere from 28 to as many as 49 wives. Joseph took for wives underage girls, some as young as 14, sisters, mothers, and their daughters, even other men's wives. Much of it kept hidden from Emma. All the while, the church and its leaders continued to deny all polygamy. Years later, with dozens of wives already, Joseph Smith claims to receive a new revelation. He declares that polygamy is required for obedient Mormons to receive exaltation, to become gods. Joseph first needed to win over Emma. He dispatched his brother Hiram to present and persuade her with this divine revelation. In Joseph's typical manipulative style, his revelation warns Emma that if she rejects it, she would be destroyed. The LDS Church admits that for Emma, her husband's polygamy was an excruciating ordeal, as she reluctantly went along with it. The Church canonized Joseph's new revelation as Section 132 in the Doctrine and Covenants, and removed Section 101, which prohibited polygamy. Despite the new revelation, Joseph's church continued to deny polygamy. But not all in the church approved. First Presidency counselors William Law and Austin Cowles published an expose on what was really happening behind closed doors.
Okay. So I'm just going to let you find that but this is another example of disobeying the law, thinking in their minds that God's law was higher than man's law. And so they lied, they manipulated, they published things, and then made claims that were untrue. Now they're doing the same thing today. They're telling these people where they're building. There's another brouhaha going on in Las Vegas. There's another one going on in a little city called Heber in Utah, where they're trying to build these very large temples with very large steeples that are completely against city ordinances. And they have enough power, they have enough lobbyists that they are able to install laws that will enable them to completely shun, civic laws and do what they want to do. There is also a very large group of what they call polygamy deniers, people who want so badly to hang on to their belief in Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon that they deny that Joseph Smith ever did practice polygamy. And what I find so funny about that is they continue to go to church. They want a temple recommend. They want to attend the temple. And yet they don't believe anything that happened after Joseph Smith was killed. And so all of the prophets since Joseph Smith, they declare were murderers, conspirators. It just, the list goes on and on. It boggles my mind. I don't understand it. But the funny thing is, as it said in that thing, they don't take Section 132 out of the sacred canon of the church. The prophet and his first counselor, Dallin Oaks, both are polygamists. Both of them, their wives died, and they married virgins. And they are sealed to those women for eternity in the temple, where they will have at least 2 wives. So the belief in polygamy is still alive and kicking. They just don't talk about it. And that is just pretty much how the church works. So let me do a little comparison here.
Community with several ponds and streams. We had lots of recreational activities, including volleyball, basketball.
By anyone's standards, Benjamin Risha had everything any child could want growing up. He grew up in the Tony Alamo Ministries compound in Dyer, Arkansas. As the adopted son of the self-proclaimed world prophet and his wife, Susan, he was treated almost like royalty.
Life was really good. until I began seeing more and more physical abuse of my friends by Tony Alamo, where they would beat us for simple things like holding hands with a girl, or if we were caught kissing a girl. One of my friends received more than 100 swats with the board while he was spread out in the air.
Born in 1934, Tony Alamo was living in California when he claimed to work in the music industry before receiving a direct message from God to begin his ministry.
When I got saved and I met Sue, it was so exciting. And then when we got married, I says, God has got to love me more than anybody in the world.
The street preacher from LA started his church in 1969, relocating 2 hours northwest of Little Rock to Dyer in 1975. He expanded his anti-Catholic apocalyptic ministry into a multi-million-dollar network of businesses and property, manufacturing elaborately decorated jackets for celebrities. Risha's first doubts came at a young age after Susan died.
Okay. So they go on to talk about how, first of all, Tony Alamo was a self-proclaimed prophet. He, like Joseph Smith, claimed that God had plucked him out of all the other humans that live on the earth and was chosen to be the prophet. He had multi-million-dollar corporations. Who does that sound like? And he did the same thing that the Mormon Church does, which is he used the people that joined as free labor. He required them to donate their paychecks to the church. Now, the church is supposedly roughly over $200 billion corporation, and yet they still require members to donate 10% of their income, just like Tony Alamo did. But Mormons will look at this cult and they don't see the similarities. So let me go on.
There's room at the cross for you.
Tony Alamo and Susan also said that she would raise from the dead in 3 days. We prayed over her body, and on the third day when she didn't rise up, in my heart, I knew Tony was a false prophet.
His hundreds of followers were taught to rely on Alamo to save their soul, but they ended up relying on him as their sole source of survival.
He required us to more or less worship him and not really God. It was his version of the Bible. It was his version of morality that was enforced, not higher power that enlightened people.
Constantly being told as you're growing up that every little thing you do, you're going to burn in hell.
Ron Decker's parents were about 18 years old when they joined the ministry. He was born into it.
There was good memories, but there was bad memories too.
After disagreeing with how Alamo led the ministry, he ran away in his early 20s.
Okay. So this is another perfect example of the same thing. You either believe or you're kicked out. And the church, and let me show you this one. This has a little bit more relevance too.
Both of my parents got saved by Tony and Susie. That was the start of it all. My dad was a really troubled kid. He became a drug addict very young.
You were a junkie? That's right. You were on hard drugs? That's right, for about 5.5 years. The police had a shot at me, the schools had a shot at me to try to cure me. I didn't even want to stop taking drugs. There was nothing out there that I even considered was reality until I met the Lord Jesus Christ. And when I did meet the Lord Jesus Christ, it took about 1 second on my knees.
My dad told me that after he stood up from being on his knees, getting saved, that the desire for heroin completely left him. He never went through withdrawals. He never desired it again, and he never, ever, ever used it again, ever. The interesting thing about this place is that the young people, the young hippies that came in, they were having supernatural experiences with God, real live ones. They were marked by their experiences after, giving their lives to Jesus. Something really was happening to them.
You'd have to be blind not to see how God is manifested here.
In spite of, whatever Tony and Susie wanted and how they were going to manipulate it, they were really meeting God, these kids. And so it was hard to convince them that what was going on was a cult.
Ministry of Evil, The Twisted Cult of Tony Alamo. Premieres Wednesday, February 27th at 11 on Sundance.
So what she's describing there is what they call emotion elevation. And it's a biological thing that happens in your body when you see something that's awesome or you experience something that you've never experienced before. So this elevation emotion that you feel is taken on or described as a spiritual experience. And so I've heard a lot of LDS people say, I understand the history. I don't believe in polygamy, but I've had so many spiritual experiences. I can't deny the Holy Ghost. And I get that. I understand that. And we were even talking, my husband and I were even talking this morning because I said, you know, when you have widows, young people that single mothers that are going over to the church and cleaning the building for free because the church decided back in the 90s, I believe, that bottom line, they could save a lot of money if they didn't have to pay a janitorial service. If they could get the members to clean the church for free, they could save a lot of money. And so they've convinced these people that this is a revelation from God, that they should go over and clean the toilets in the building, wash the windows, vacuum the floors, and clean up because it is a service to God. And he said to me, but you don't understand. These people that go over there, they are so happy that they're doing this. And I said, that's because they believe. They're being obedient. They're following God's principles that they've been told. When in reality, if a letter came from headquarters and the bishop over the pulpit said, we are now going to hire janitorial service to clean our buildings, but what we'd like for you to do is serve weekly in a food bank in your neighborhood, in your community. Every week, we'd love for you to do that. These people would get the same emotional elevation that they get from going over and cleaning the church for free. It's a matter of obedience and feeling good about what you're doing. So that's very interesting. So let me share another example with you.
Put Jesus Christ first, because your eternal life is dependent upon your faith in him and in his atonement. It is also dependent upon your obedience to his laws. Obedience paves the way for a joyful life for you today and a grand eternal reward tomorrow.
Okay. So there again, you have the obedience. And even if you don't have a reward today, you will receive it in the next life. And there's very many people who have struggled, even though they're paying a full tithe, they're serving in the calling, they're cleaning the toilets on Saturday, they're still struggling. And so they think, well, that's okay, because eternally I will have many mansions and I will find happiness after I die. I think that's really a sad teaching. Let me share another one with you. And by the way, that was the prophet that's almost 100 years old speaking there. And where did you go? Okay.
Members of glory, according to the desires manifested through their choices.
Let me go back a little.
Savior, who we are taught glorifies the Father and saves all the works of his hands, will send all the children of God to one of these kingdoms of glory, according to the desires manifested through their choices. Another unique doctrine and practice of the restored church is the revealed commandments and covenants that offer all the children of God the sacred privilege of qualifying for the highest degree of glory in the celestial kingdom.
Now, I wish that I could speed this up because it's so stinking slow. I can't believe how slowly he talks. But what he's saying there is, according to your choices, according to how you act, according to your works here on earth, you will be delegated to a certain degree of glory in the next life. So Mormons teach, and again, going back to the gentleman that talked about what is the symbol of a cult, a unique feature of the Mormon church is that we don't necessarily believe in, there again, here I am saying we don't, they don't believe in a heaven and a hell. They believe that there are degrees. And according to how you act here on earth, you will be delegated to one of these degrees. So, if you're not following all of the rules that the church sets out, that they haven't changed from yesterday, then you'll be in a kingdom in the telestial kingdom or the terrestrial kingdom. But now what he's talking about is if you want to live in the highest kingdom, in true heaven with Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father, you have to obey all of the laws that we will tell you are the laws directly from God.
The highest destination, exaltation in the celestial kingdom, is the focus of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. From modern revelation, Latter-day Saints have this unique understanding of God's plan of happiness for his children.
Okay. So there again, he's just stating, just like Tony Alamo did, if you want true happiness, you have to obey our very unique beliefs that came to us directly from God that no one else on earth has. Now, the church is making a very large 180 right now. They're going through a little bit of what I talked about in my last podcast, which is an evangelical chapter. We were taught, I was taught as an adult member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that we did not wear crosses. We did not have crosses on our buildings or in our buildings in a picture form. And we do not have crosses in our homes because a cross is the symbol of the crucifixion, and we celebrate the atonement. And we don't want to be associated with all of those churches that have crosses. Well, now the churches actually, some of their missionaries are wearing crosses. And I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a cross in a church somewhere, because they are trying to be accepted by the evangelicals as Christians. They want to join the evangelical Christian movement that's going on right now. And so the only way they can do that is to become more evangelical and less separate Mormon elite. And that's what they're doing right now. That's the phase that they're going through right now. So I think I will leave you today with that. So what I'm saying is, I understand, even with this historical knowledge, that it may be difficult for you as a woman over the age of 60 to leave a community that you have been in since birth. You may have 7 or 8 children that are all members. You don't want to miss out on any kind of activities. I understand that. But let me give you permission today to say something that you probably have never said in your life, and that is no. I want to give you permission to say, I will attend church weekly with my family. However, I will not serve in that specific calling that you're asking me for, because I don't believe that's best for me. I don't believe that's best for my family. And it's just something that I choose not to do right now. There's an opportunity to say no. When you are asked as a retired couple to give up a certain amount of time to go serve in another area of the world as missionaries, you have permission to say no. I have looked forward all my life of being a grandmother, and I don't want to miss out on my grandchildren. Now, I have 14 grandchildren. My oldest grandson is almost 22 years old. The next grandchild just graduated from high school. Next year, another one. The year after that, another one will graduate. They're growing up so fast. And I was there for their birth. I want to be there for their graduations. I want to be there when they get married. I want to be a part of their lives. And I don't know a woman who doesn't want that. So I am giving you permission to say, no, I choose not to do that. I want and am entitled to enjoy the season of my life of being a grandmother. So I give you permission to say no. So that is what I'm basically saying is you have permission. You can find autonomy without having to leave the community. And I remember when someone said to me, someone in a position of authority, I was explaining that I was really, when I was choosing to resign my membership, which, by the way, I mentioned that I was going to say this, any other church, any other Christian church, you just walk away. You say, I don't like that pastor. I don't like the bishop of that particular parish. So I don't want to go there. I'm going to go to another church down the street. So you walk away and you start attending another church down the street. In the Mormon church, you have to get a letter, a formal letter, notarized and sent into Salt Lake City headquarters to remove your name as a member of the church. It's a legal process to get your name taken off of the records so that they can't count you in their membership, and two, they'll stop bugging you because they will continue to send missionaries and home teachers, visiting teachers, ministering, whatever they call them now, until you die. If you don't resign, take your name off the records. I find that interesting, a little mafia cartelish, as that man was saying. So anyway, that's my message for you today. Practice. I want you to look into a mirror every day, women, and say, no, I don't choose that for myself today. That's my message. So thank you for joining me. I hope this was informative to you. Remember, I'm not asking for your money. I'm asking for you to subscribe, follow, share. Share this with any woman that you know that is struggling with membership in a fundamental high demand religion, who is suffering with depression, who is crying because she's exhausted. Share this video with her and tell her every day, every morning when you wake up, look in the mirror and say, no, I choose not to do that for myself today. That's my message. So I will be, speaking of being a grandparent, I will be going and visiting some fabulous grandchildren next week. And the week after that is, what have we got going? I can't remember, but we're heading into July and we've got a lot of 4th of July plans, a lot of family plans. So I think for the next couple of months, my podcasts are going to be a little bit sporadic. And, but I hope to be joining you again with some more information that will help you to become autonomous, to live your best life, to become visible, to say to yourself, I have value, I have worth, I choose to be visible and to be me, to be the best me I know how to be. So thanks for joining me today. Bye-bye.